Okay, let me start. Good evening, everyone. I want to thank everyone for logging into our virtual meeting for January. This is the Quaker City Montco Shrine Club's January 7th stated meeting. I think we have a couple friends on right now who are not Shriners. So here's a quick little housekeeping. Shriners protocol is when the proper way to refer to a Shriner is a noble. And the potentate or the president is illustrious sir. It is an old English term. And we refer to past potentates or illustrious as illustrious sirs. So we have a couple illustrious sirs on this on the Zoom call, which is very nice for them to log in. All the women are known as ladies. We will now open. So I will say, good evening, welcome illustrious sirs, members of the Divan, past presidents of the Quaker City Montco Shrine Club, nobles, ladies, and guests. Good evening.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Top of the night.
Is Paul on? Paul is not on. Who can? Sean, do you have the prayer for the high priest and prophet by chance?
Mike, I can do it.
You can do it. Okay.
I can do it.
So I will now call upon our chief for band, John Green, to lead us in an opening prayer.
Okay, everybody uncovered, right? So, Heavenly Father, we thank you for the many blessings you have given us. We thank you for the privilege of meeting together in friendship and brotherhood. We ask that thy healing hands are those who are sick or infirmed, especially our children entrusted to our care. Bless the military. We ask this in your holy name. Amen.
So motivate.
I will now call upon Gary Portnoy to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
Okay, you can hand salute if you're a veteran. Other than that, hand over heart. I pledge allegiance
To
To
the
the
flag
flag
of the United States
of
of
America.
and to the republic for
Public
which
for which
it
it
stands,
stands.
one nation,
Nation under God.
indivisible,
Liberty and justice for all.
Justice
for all.
Start out with words. Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light
What's
the
early at the twilight
Who's
the word tell us.
rise
Rise
and
stars
stars
through the
perilous fight.
for the ramble tree
But we
watch
watch
so
so
gallant
They stream
and the
rockets
rockets
glare.
bombs
Our
burst
bombs bursting in air.
they drew
Through the night.
black
that our
Dark
flag
flag
still
still
there.
there.
as
Oh,
say
say
does
does
that
that
star-spangled
banner
wave
and the
the
land
land
of
free
glory
and the home
of
of
brave.
You gotta love it.
keep your
The
day job.
greatest clown skit I've ever heard.
Hey, Bart,
That's true.
Back in the classroom.
We have to tape. Somebody tape that.
I did get it taped. This will go on YouTube as probably the worst rendition.
That was the
of
worst.
ever.
I'm
Absolute
playing it
worst.
next year's Eagles game. Will be a highlight of the game.
Yes. Okay. Thank you, everyone. I want to thank everyone for coming tonight. I am very happy to see everyone. I hope tonight's meeting is very informative. Normally, this would be the first meeting of the year. Our new president would open. Let's say I would open because I'm the previous year's president, and Arthur would then take over. But due to a scheduling thing, Arthur will be sworn in on Saturday. So right now, I am still the president. Arthur is the president-elect. Our president-elect is Arthur Beiner. Our first VP next year is Donald Stinky Fink. Our second VP is Stephen Rasho. Our treasurer is Dennis Gold, past president. Our secretary is Barry Oppenheim. Our members at large, Jerry Springer, Mark Weinstein, and illustrious Sir Finke. Our steward is Fred Roderick, Leon Werb, and Tom McDonald, and I'm in retirement next year. I want to share the screen real quick with everyone.
Debatable.
Bear with me 1 second, everybody. Let me just share my screen.
Really?
Does everyone see that?
Nope.
Nothing to be.
Yeah, what-
Nothing on it.
Oh, there it is.
better.
Okay, got it.
There it is.
Okay.
That's what they,
Very good,
Let
Mike.
me make this bigger.
this.
So I want to say that last night we were honored to be given the Club of the Year award, and that's someone else holding the plaque there. No, it's me. But I want to thank, I know illustrious Sir Ed is on, and thank you for recognizing the club and the achievement of it. It is extremely appreciative for all the hard work that we did this last year. So thank you, illustrious Sir. And on a side note, illustrious Sir also gave me a certificate of appreciation, which was extremely caught me by surprise, but also appreciated.
Hey, Mike, why don't you smile? You're more than welcome, trust me.
Thank you, illustrious. And hope everyone checks out the Fez. We have a really nice article in there and a picture of our 5th largest Fez, or whatever we're actually calling it, but this is our new float that will be used upcoming for our floats. And our quill, please check it out, because that's all the information in regards to the club. Bart sends it out, and we put some effort in it. There's stuff hyperlinked on it where Zoom meetings are. So it would be appreciative if you guys can go onto that going forward, because that's the way you'll learn what's going on in the club. It's also on our Facebook page, aside from getting blasted out. So that's that. And now at this time, I will call upon our first vice president, our president-elect, Arthur Binder, to introduce our featured speaker. Arthur, the floor is yours.
Okay. I would like to introduce my son, Jason Binder. He's right there, yeah. He has a Bachelor of Science from Biology. He has a law degree from Widener. And presently, he works for Amgen Corporation out of Cambridge, Massachusetts. And he's in the Regulatory Affairs Division. And he does FDA submissions. And now I'm turning it over to Jason. So let him just talk and
Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, I can.
Perfect. Let me share my screen if I can. Actually, the host has to enable screen sharing.
Can you share now? Is it working for you?
Yep.
Okay.
Can you guys see?
Yes.
Yep.
Okay, so my father, Arthur, had asked that I come tonight, and I'm honored to do so, to present briefly on drug development, and particularly with respect to a little bit about the vaccine development that we've been hearing a lot about in the news. And I decided upon myself to also include a little bit about regulatory affairs, and in particular regulatory affairs, CMC, which is where I'm at now at Amgen up here in Cambridge, Massachusetts. So just a brief agenda, a little bit about myself, a little bit about drug development. We'll touch upon the vaccine development for COVID. I'll introduce you guys to regulatory affairs, CMC, and then we could open it up to questions and or discussion. So about me, I know my dad just touched upon this briefly. I am Arthur's son. My name is Jason. I attended Northeast High School down closer to you guys in Philadelphia. Went to Temple University, got a BS in biology, then took a position at Centocor in operations. That is a subsidiary at the time of Johnson & Johnson. I believe it's now a subsidiary of Janssen Pharmaceuticals. That company was based out of Malvern, Pennsylvania. They also had several other locations generally in the area. I know there was one in Springhouse, in Horsham, and there probably still is one today. After Centocor, I left Centocor. I pursued my JD degree at Widener University in Delaware, right down south. After law school, I joined Pfizer as a contractor, worked a little bit in regulatory affairs, regulatory operations. That was in Collegeville, PA, again in the area. And then just most recently, although it's not most recently anymore, but about 5 years ago, I brought myself and my wife, she was pregnant at the time, with my daughter, and took a position with Amgen in regulatory affairs, CMC, based out of Cambridge, Massachusetts. The headquarters for the company is actually in Thousand Oaks, but they have sites around the world, one in Rhode Island, one up here, and one in California, at least for the US. So a little bit about drug development. This can get pretty heavy pretty quickly. So, and I know I have limited time, so I decided I wanted to keep it high level to give you, points to take home and consider and think about as we continue to hear more about drug development in the news, particularly with respect to the COVID vaccine. So, if anything, just take away from my talk tonight that drug development is very, very, very expensive. A net cost, this slide's actually a little bit outdated. It cost about 800. This slide says 800 million. It's closer to $1 billion. So $1 billion from start to finish. That's just for one drug. As you can see on the left-hand side of this slide, it takes about 10 years to get a solid drug discovered and approved. That's just here in the US FDA approval. It then goes on to other countries around the world where it's approved by various regulatory authorities. Some review times for those filings are upwards of 2-3 years just in itself. So it takes a long time to develop one drug. It's very expensive, about 1 billion. And if you look on the right side, the success rates for drug development is it's very difficult to develop a drug, right? So these are small molecule drugs. This is the rate for small molecule drugs, and that's more, you can think of it as more like a tablet, something that you ingest. It's a hard prescribed medicine in most scenarios. So you can see that we start off with maybe 5,000 to 10,000 potential candidates for a drug. Only 250 of them enter preclinical testing. That's further on in discovery. That involves also animal testing. It's called toxicology testing. So they test it in vitro on animals before entering the human body. Out of those 250 drug candidates, only 5 enter clinical testing. And then out of those 5 that enter clinical testing, typically only 1 is approved by the FDA. So we're going from at most 10,000 drugs or 10,000 drug candidates to 1 approved by the FDA. With respect to vaccines, it's a little bit better. So I did some research earlier this week, and if we start with potentially 100 vaccines at the starting point, 20 potential vaccines would reach preclinical. So that's that first row there. Out of that 20, 10 would enter clinical testing. 5 would continue on through clinical testing, and then 1 will get approved by the FDA. Still very expensive. Still generally takes a very long time, about 10 years to develop a vaccine. So before we move on, I wanted to focus on the clinical center testing. This is where folks in regulatory affairs get involved in the drug development phase in most organizations. This is more of a development and research function, the screened and preclinical testing. But my colleagues get involved typically at clinical testing through the approval process and then post-approval. So the clinical trials are, again, very expensive, take a lot of time. They are typically start off with what's called an initial investigational new drug application. It's the same for all drugs, whether it's a small molecule like a tablet, whether it's a large molecule like an injection that you would receive of some sort, maybe an intravenous injection, maybe a subcutaneous below the skin objection or whether it's a vaccine. It starts with an initial application that, hey, FDA, we are ready to go. We're confident we can move into phase 1 studies. It's a first in human. This is where we first inject or provide the therapy to the humans and see how it responds. We have phase 1 study, phase 2, and I'll go into this a little bit further later, but phase 1 studies, phase 2 studies, phase 3 studies. Once we're confident that we have all the clinical data and the manufacturing knowledge and know-how, we understand sufficiently about the product and how it behaves, we file a new drug application. This is essentially the application to FDA that asks FDA to allow us to sell the drug in the United States. So prior to getting the approval of the NDA or the new drug application, all of the drug cannot be sold. It's just for research purposes. But once we file the NDA and it's approved, we can then start selling the drug for profit. The FDA reviewers will approve the application. Once it's submitted, they'll either say, yes, it's approved, no, it's not approved. And then we go into phase 4 studies, which are post-approval studies. That's if we want to add an additional therapy, an additional indication to the drug, or if we want to potentially change the route of administration. Let's say we maybe want to go to from a extended infusion where you're in the hospital for 2 weeks getting the infusion, and we want to change it to maybe a short-term subcutaneous or below the skin infusion. So phase 1 clinical trials, this is the start of going into humans, particularly with respect to FDA. They are primarily concerned about safety. Primarily, the drug at this stage only goes into healthy volunteers. These folks do not suffer the disease for which we're trying to cure. So healthy volunteers, small data set of folks, primarily concerned about safety. Primary tenet of the FDA with these phase 1 trials is do no harm. These are healthy folks, don't hurt them, and let's see how the drug responds in the body. Phase 2, they continue on. This is the next stage of clinical development. A bigger sample size, maybe 50 to 300 patients. Sometimes they're blinded, which means either the person receiving the drug therapy doesn't know if they're getting the actual drug or placebo, or if the person delivering the drug does not know if they're actually delivering or administering the placebo or the actual drug. Again, always concerned with safety, but these folks, the phase 2 folks, generally start. These are the folks that actually suffer from the disease. So if you're trying to cure for multiple myeloma, which is one of the drugs that I work on at Amgen, the folks in the phase 2 study would be suffering from multiple myeloma. And we are trying to see how the body responds and if the drug is actually efficacious, if it's doing its job once it's injected in the patient, and to see if they go into remission at all. And again, well, not again, but at this phase 2, we're starting to look at drug toxicity. This is semi sort of related to safety, but are we injecting something that's possibly toxic or inducing a toxic response by the patient? And then lastly, how does this drug interact with other drugs that the patient may be currently on? Phase 3, again, this is further down the line. These are very expensive, very time consuming, upwards of 3-4 years. We're looking at 250 to 1,000 patients. They could be blinded, depending upon what the indication is. Again, safety, efficacy. Here we're comparing with other drugs. So let's say we're intending to go for approval of our drug A. We want to see how it compares with another drug that's already on the market, say drug B, or we could be comparing our drug when used in conjunction with another drug versus other drugs. So there's all different combinations that we could run the trials with to see how the data plays out and see, what kind of indication we can provide on the label, which will, ultimately, hopefully, get approved by FDA. So just a little bit about the COVID-19 vaccines. Those COVID-19 vaccines that we hear about in the news, they are going through a mechanism entitled Emergency Use Authorization. There's some predeterminants that have to be met. We need a public health emergency, which obviously COVID that satisfies. What it does, this emergency use authorization, it requires medicines or vaccines in this case to be used while they're unapproved or used for unapproved uses. So we could potentially have a drug on the market that's indicated for psoriasis, and somebody says, hey, you know what, this drug may work for COVID, let's try that. So that's not an approved use, right? We didn't do trials to support that use, but if it works, that's great, let's use it. Or an unapproved drug. So let's say the drug is not typically approved, the FDA can indicate that this is emergency use authorization, and folks or companies like Moderna here in Cambridge, Mass, or AstraZeneca, or J&J has one coming out, or the Pfizer one, they could start being used in the clinic, even though they have not received the traditional approval that other therapies would have received. I think importantly, that requires there to be no other adequate and approved alternate therapy. So if there's another drug out there that does the same, there's no need for emergency use authorization, right? So this is really a special case. So what happens? So if the sponsor or the company, let's say Amgen or Pfizer or Moderna, know they have a candidate for emergency use authorization, they would contact or interact with the FDA early. They would set predetermined clinical and manufacturing targets that have to be met to gain that emergency use. They would still be required to conduct phase 1, phase 2, and phase 3 studies. So all 3 phases that I discussed prior still have to be met. There's no bypassing that. And according to FDA's guidance, they require about 3,000 recipients or patients on the trial, majority of which have to be enrolled in the phase 3 study, which is the larger study. And half of those recipients must have been followed up by a healthcare administrator or clinician, some sort, with an average of 2 months follow-up. Once the phase 3 is over, the clinical study data is reviewed by the company, Pfizer, Amgen, what have you, and interpreted. If the company determines, yes, we have something here that met those predetermined points, then they will submit a emergency use authorization to FDA. FDA would review the clinical data that we just discussed, some of the manufacturing data, data about the product, and they would outweigh the known benefit of the vaccine versus they would weigh the benefit of the vaccine versus the known benefit of the vaccine, how well it does in the body to fight COVID, and weigh that against the known risks. So let's say the side effects are very low, but this thing kicks COVID's butt, fine. But if this thing does so-so against COVID, but induces a heart attack, obviously not so great. So that's somewhere where maybe a vaccine would not be approved. So FDA would conduct an advisory committee meeting, which means this happens in every situation, but they would bring experts from outside of FDA, and they would hold a public meeting, most of the time broadcast actually on the internet. And the advisory committee asks, these are experts in the field, they would ask the sponsor directed questions. FDA would be in attendance. This just serves for FDA to get a different perspective on the drug. And then after the advisory committee meeting, the FDA either grants or denies the emergency use authorization. So this is a little bit about the COVID-19 vaccines. Again, it's under emergency use authorization. They're not technically approved, but the companies are allowed to, sell those therapies for use. And a little bit about regulatory affairs, CMC, which is actually what I do at Amgen. CMC stands for Chemistry, Manufacturing, and Controls. So this is the slide from earlier before. I stated it takes a long time, and a lot of the drugs are paired off to the side. They don't make it to the very end. So as a company is shepherding through these drugs through the pipeline, so this would be considered the drug pipeline. So something up here that's just discovered will be very early in the pipeline, but something in phase 3 that's ready to go for that NDA filing that would allow for the commercialization of the product and allow the company to sell the product, that would be late in the pipeline. So this is the company's pipeline. As the assets or the therapy is moving through the pipeline, you need folks in a regulatory affairs capacity to guide, for lack of better words, guide the program with its FDA interactions as it proceeds. So prior to filing an IND, which is the first stage, typically there's a meeting. You want regulatory affairs there to strategize as far as, okay, what data do we have? How are we going to strategize approaching the FDA? What do we want from them? How are we going to get it essentially? End of phase one, there's a meeting that's conducted. Regulatory affairs leads that. End of phase two, there's a meeting. And then prior to filing the NDA, there's a meeting. So there's several meetings. There's a lot of submissions that go into FDA for review during the process. There's submissions going in for the phase one study, for the phase two study, for the phase three study. There's submissions for potentially changes in the drug, changes in the clinical trial design. Everything you could think of requires a submission to FDA, and it is regulatory affairs that guides the company in how to interact and what are we submitting and what is that submission going to look like to the FDA and the negotiation process. So CMC is particularly responsible for. So you can think of regulatory affairs in a general as the clinical side of the house, as far as interacting with the FDA on the clinical side with the trial design, the data that we have. CMC is particularly concerned with chemistry and manufacturing control. So they're responsible for the actual products. So I just wanted to show this. This is the needle. This is for my son. He had eczema. So it's something like this, which is not an injectable. This is a CVS sample. But if this was an injectable, we would be responsible for this in the process. So we would be responsible for the container closure, which is the sealant, the plunger. There's a stopper in here, all the material contact that goes in touch with the product itself, right? How does the product, what is the product? What is the structure of the product? How does the product respond to different stresses, light, heat, temperature change? How do we transport the product to the different manufacturing sites and to the clinic or the hospitals around the world? How long is it good for, right? So if we ship this out from Amgen or wherever and ship it to Philadelphia at the loading dock, and it goes to the doctor's office, how long could this sit on the shelf before it's no longer good, like an expiry? Think of milk or eggs or something that's has a defined expiry period. So CMC is involved with all of that. In addition to the product aspect, we're also responsible for the manufacturing and the processes by which we manufacture the product. So I'm not going to get into it, but suffice it to say, there's a lot of information that have to be collected, that has to be tabulated, that has to be arranged into solid arguments that we include in the filings that go to FDA for approval. And I just wanted to highlight, this is probably overkill, but I just took a sampling of some of the aspects of CMC that we are responsible for. Again, the structure of the actual drug substance or the drug product. What are the impurities in here that may have a harmful or deleterious effect on the human body? Where is it manufactured? How is it manufactured? How are we getting it from site to site? What if there's a screw up in actually manufacturing this? Can we go back and can we take the material and reprocess it to go backwards and start again, right, to make it right? Where does the drug come from? What are the raw materials that are used to start the drug process? How are we controlling the manufacturing process? How the process evolved. Let's say this drug here had 10 iterations from the early discovery, from phase 1 to phase 3. How are we controlling any changes in the manufacturing process as it goes through the pipeline? And how are we making sure that this drug is comparable to the previous iteration? Because if it's not comparable, let's say we have this drug and it's not comparable to the earlier iteration, then we can't leverage the clinical data that was gained on the earlier iteration. We essentially have another drug. The specifications when it's manufactured, when it's released, what makes this drug okay from a product testing perspective. What makes most often there'll be labeling on the syringe. Believe it or not, there's testing to be done to make sure that the ink on the labeling doesn't penetrate if it's a porous material, doesn't penetrate the syringe and actually enter the drug itself. That's a test. Whether the materials of construction of the actual syringe or whatever it is, needle, doesn't penetrate, doesn't seep into the drug product and maybe cause some impurities there that will be therefore injected into the product. So suffice it to say, there's a lot of material, particularly with respect to CMC, that has to be submitted and negotiated with the FDA to make sure that we get approval for our various therapies as they move through the pipeline. And I think at the end, I wanted to pass it back to my father.
Anybody have okay. At this time, is there any questions for Jason that, as far as Amgen or other COVID disease or so? I know he went over a lot of information. Does anybody have anything?
I got a couple.
Okay.
You get volunteers. Where do you draw them from, and are they paid, or does that depend on the drug?
So the volunteers are typically volunteers. You can actually go to clinicaltrials.gov, which is a website that lists all the clinical trials going on in the U.S. And you can go there and see what's doing. So if you have a friend or relative that's suffering from a disease that potentially does not have a therapy, and I know people that went there and signed up for trials. Most of the time, they're volunteers. And these are folks potentially let's say the drug that I'm working on for multiple myeloma. Unfortunately, these folks have failed 3 other treatments. So they received 3 other drugs, and this multiple myeloma keeps coming back. So these folks, we have the trial, and it's an experimental drug. We cannot prove that. Obviously, our hope is that it's not harmful to them, but we cannot prove any success, right? So they're taking this on the chance that it will help them, and it will help them, and also get the company the data they need to pursue with a commercial approval.
Second question, if you don't mind. You said one of the things, I stepped away from the screen for a second. One of the things you said was that you have to check how they interact with other drugs, right?
Correct.
Did I hear that right?
Right.
If they're not your drugs, is there permission? Is there legal stuff, or can you just literally buy it off the shelf or get a prescription for it and try it out? If it's not yours, I would assume you know your own.
Yeah, so if it's an approved, that's the tricky question, right? In the US, if it's another drug that's commercially available, we just buy it, right? But if it's not commercially approved and they're also in clinical trials, then we have to work out an agreement with that company to use their therapy along with our investigational therapy.
Okay. So if it's on the market, you can just buy it and try it.
In the US, yes.
Yeah. In other countries, not the way you said it.
Yeah,
not necessarily.
It's very complicated. There's an entire department that's focused on comparators like this, and how do we get those comparators in the clinical trials as needed.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
I have a question, Jason. With the COVID testing, how were they able to get such a quick clinical trial done on these? Because I know you're saying it takes years, when in reality, this is basically taking months.
Good question. So I think, I don't know the exact answer, but I know a lot of time is spent, obviously, on clinical trials. A lot of time is spent by the company or the sponsor kind of strategizing how we're going to approach the FDA, what exactly is enough for a typical drug, and maybe it's overboard than what maybe they would actually accept. Because the company, when they approach the FDA, they want to be absolutely sure of what they're approaching with. It's very risky, right? Because they could say no and kill the entire program. I think it was done so quickly. Obviously, there's still the required phase, 3 phases of study. But the FDA has been very upfront with these sponsors and say, hey, you do this, this, and this. You have a good shot of emergency use authorization. So there's no guessing. Like the companies know if we meet this and this and this, we have a shot, right?
Okay, thank you.
And my son works for NIH, and when this first reared its ugly head around the end of February, and I talked to him, he said there was already a phase 1 in operation at that time, very, very early. That they had been looking at this very early on, and we're in a phase 1 trial in one of the companies at that time. So it's not really that young a vaccine. If you look at it that way, it's actually a if that one particular made it, I don't remember the name, which one it was, or if it even made it through, but that would be a year, which is, not real short time.
I mean, and some of them, some of the companies, they know the government, so there's a lot of risk, right? A lot of money, a lot of time in these candidates. Let's say you have 100 vaccines, they all die they all don't make it. That's a lot of time and money you're spending on these targets. But if they know the government's there waiting to subsidize the operations or the research, the risk is basically taken away from these companies, and they have that much more enticement to act. Let alone the popularity. Obviously, Pfizer, first drug, first vaccine, popularity, goodwill, social goodwill through the roof, right? It's amazing.
Well, they're also not starting from scratch. A vaccine for a virus made this way, that's not the first time it's ever been done, right?
Yep.
Well, there was a PhD from Penn who formulated her theory about attacking the virus through the DNA, which is what Pfizer and Moderna did. So they basically built upon her work. They didn't have to start thinking from from zero.
Yeah, that's what I was saying.
What's that?
That's what I was saying. Yeah, they weren't starting from the ground up.
Yeah, that's why they was so fast in getting theirs up and running.
Jason, is there something in the process that makes Pfizer's requirement for low temperature so much different than like Moderna or the other one where they can be refrigerated at normal refrigeration?
Yeah, so that deals with, actually the drug that I'm working on is actually also minus 70 degrees C, which is the same, I believe, temperature as Pfizer. Incredibly cold, and it's difficult to imagine, but actually the drug changes even though it's frozen at minus 70 degrees. So it really just depends on the formulation they chose and the conditions they set up for that formulation to show FDA that this is behaving as we expect and it's stable, right? So we could ship this around the world potentially, and at minus 70 degrees C, it's still the same drug. Let's say maybe it's a warmer condition, let's say minus 30 or even refrigerated. Let's say there's a danger they ship it to Brazil or China, and by the time it gets there, it's completely degraded. It's a protein, right? So it degrades, and once it degrades, it's not effective, right? It's basically injecting not junk, but it's not going to work, right?
Jason, I have a question for you on the litigious portion of it. So this new vaccine is the vaccines are out for COVID. Your typical process for a drug takes X amount of years, a very long time to kind of get all the kinks out of it. These drugs have been pushed out so quickly. They know some of the side effects, but if something goes wrong, couldn't they have like a huge mass lawsuit? Like say they sterilize all the children, who end up getting, I'm just using a hypothetical, or women over X amount get sick from this.
I don't know the answer to that. I imagine there could be. There may be something in the guidelines that state that there's immunity from the sponsors that go under emergency authorization. I know I did from reading, and the responsibility for issuing this is on the sponsor itself and also the agency of the government for issuing the authorization. So there may be some, I don't know offhand, but I'm thinking maybe there's some immunity there for the sponsor.
Yeah, one more question, because I know you're a father also. For now, they're not rolling these out to any children. Um, the safety of it for children.
Right. So a lot of times, and particularly, actually all the time, you're required, if we know, if you know the drug, if you know that the indication does not usually affect children, you don't have to do pediatric studies. But if you know, let's say the COVID disease will affect children, that's a separate set of clinical studies that you need to do prior to you injecting the drug or anything, administering it to children. It's a separate subset of clinical studies that obviously have not yet been done, right? I'm sure if they have been done and they have the data, the pediatric data to go to the FDA and say, look, this drug at this dose is still good for kids. Let us do it. I'm sure they would let them do it, but I would bet, and I don't know, but I would bet that data is not generated yet. Same thing with pregnant women, right? That's usually another group that's usually studied. I want to say after the thought, but generally it's afflicted people, but generally not pregnant women, not kids.
Jason, you say it's shipped at a certain temperature.
Correct.
What temperature is injected into you?
So typically it depends on the drug, right? So it depends what the sponsor dictates for administration. Usually it's thawed. Obviously it cannot be injected frozen as a brick, right? So they want to thaw it. The variable is what temperature is it? How long of a duration? So let's say it goes to the hospital. It's taken out of the freezer, and let's say the sponsor says, okay, hospital, it must stay on that shelf to thaw for at least 6 hours, right, to get to room temperature. Or let's say you have to put it in the refrigerator to thaw it. Let's say you thaw a turkey that way, right? You put it in the refrigerator, it still thaws, but the thaw is slower, right? It's really up to the sponsor to design the study and direct the hospital to tell them, hey, when you get this and you thaw it, this is how you want to do it to make sure that drug's still intact when it gets injected.
Jason, by the way, I want to thank you for your speech here, and then the information you're imparting is really great. That we get to experts who are in the fields, and then we can get some great information kind of from the horse's mouth, so to speak. I think the drug that Mike may have been referring to, knowingly or not, was thalidomide. If anyone remembers that, you remember that, Mike? Yeah.
Sure.
Which was given to pregnant women and caused birth defects back in the 60s. And that apparently created this long duration of testing so that materials would be safe for the public.
Yeah, but it was never approved in the United States. It was approved in England, but never in the United States.
That I didn't know. I was
I'm not so sure
not
that's
so
accurate.
sophisticated then. I was still in school, but good to know that.
The FDA blocked it.
Oh, they did block it before, so there were no
None in the United States.
victims in the States then, just in Europe.
Nope.
Okay. Well, that's somewhat relieving, even though you hate to see that happen. But in the duration that it takes to get a product, it cost $1 billion. And I was in the ag side for a long time, and it would take about 4 or 5 years from the time you got your patent to the time you could actually sell your first ounce or dose of the material. And then you had the rest of your patent time, which was I think about 17 years, to sell the product before generics came in and kind of watered down the market. With this super speed, warp speed, or whatever that the product came in on recently, that would increase the marketing time by several years, probably. Do you think because it's just one kind of thing, they're not going to change the law? Or if this opens the door to other things, do you think they would change the legal aspects of that duration?
I imagine it would stay the same, and not change just for this one therapy.
Okay.
Keep in mind the COVID. So again, for emergency use authorization, these are not approved drugs, right? So that maybe the clock is not starting to tick, right? So they haven't actually gotten the full approval just yet.
Well, if they had their patent, usually it starts from the time the patent until the patent is expired. Now, they can renew it, I think, for another 17 years or so. But if they can't renew it after that, then the generics kind of fill in, and they have to make up that $1 billion within that time in order to stay in business.
I mean, it's not only generics, right? So you have competitors, right? So you'd be, and my wife, and even it's hard to believe, but we have, we have let's say a new drug at Amgen or wherever, and there's always somebody at your heels with that same, not the same drug, but maybe it works the same indication right behind you. So you have to get, one of the goals is to get first to market. So all the doctors and the physicians and the patients, they start the therapy on your drug X. This way, 2 months later, when drug Y comes around, nobody wants to switch because they have success on drug X, right? So that's a big impetus for going as fast as possible as well.
Now, I've heard that I guess the government's buying up the dosages for administration initially, and I've heard that they've only purchased so many doses, and they're short of what the whole country would need. Do you think that's in order to spread it around for the different companies as their products mature and become validated and available?
That I don't know. I'm not sure.
Well,
how long, like my wife's getting a shot on Monday. How long does it stay in her system? So, I mean, when will she have to get her next, other than that second shot, when will she have to get the next one? They don't know. So it could be a month or 2 months or 3 months, right?
No, they don't know that.
I certainly don't know. I mean, it's really dependent upon the therapy and what the dosing regimen is. I can't speak to the vaccine themselves.
well, they had said that the drugs are so new, they don't know whether it's long lasting or like a flu shot where it has to be every season you have to get one.
They don't know.
Actually,
Those of you who
can I say something about that? Finky, the thing is, like like Arthur said, it's so new, but normally they have to go through these analyses of variants and test things out and figure out how long things are good for so many people and what the likelihood is. Anyway, if the initial thought was maybe it'll be good for a year.
That's what I would
But
think.
it's not out a year, so they don't know. It hasn't met the test yet. That's the question. They have to wait and see, once it's out, how long. But the another question, which is really a tough one, they've isolated other strains, other mutations of COVID, and there are a lot of questions about that.
Right.
What,
They don't know if that'll work.
what's going to happen? I should ask Jason, is there any evidence that some of the vaccines will work as well on the other strains, or they may be immune to the medicines?
I mean, from what I've heard, they will be effective. So the targeting protein on the virus itself, it's still there. So the vaccine is still able to target it. The target's still there. If the target was not there, obviously the efficacy would probably go away. From what anecdotally, from what I heard, the targets that they're targeting, that these vaccines are targeting, are still there on these variants. So that's good news for sure.
I want to thank Jason. Any other questions? One more question or two? Anybody else?
A little statement I just checked. 30 below Celsius is 22 below Fahrenheit, just in case somebody was curious.
Okay. I want to thank Jason. Now you know who the smartest one in the family is.
Your wife.
Spoken like an old married man.
Anyway, so we're going to continue with the meeting now. Thank you, Jason. I apprate it.
Thank you all. Have a good night.
Thank you, Jason.
Pleasure.
Thank you, Jason.
Thank you, Jason. Great job.
Thank you, Jason.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. I'm going back to Mike.
I'm about I'm about to pass it back to you, though. Arthur is going to be the president as of Saturday. So, Arthur, do you want to say some words and also about any upcoming events that we have?
Okay. I want to thank, my son. I actually volunteered him. I figured with everything that's going on, and you keep hearing about the FDA submission, it was a timely, it was a time that we should know what's going on, because, you hear so much and it's a black box. FDA, it's, you don't know. Anyway, so I just want to thank him. I'll thank him tomorrow. What's going up is we have a Zoom hospital visit on the 31st of January at 5 o'clock. And I would like our illustrious Sir Finky to talk about that, because he is the relative expert on that one.
Well, every year, Quaker has a hospital visit with the hospital, with the Quaker City. They sponsor it. This year, we're not allowed in the hospital, so unfortunately, to have a party. So I developed a program we call it the Zoom concert. Still a celebration of the month. At the last day of every month, I end up getting the entertainment, and unfortunately, the kids can't have toys and they can't have a pizza or whatever we end up ordering for food. But they end up getting a concert with an up and coming great singer. This month, Quaker City is sponsoring the Zoom meeting, and unfortunately, it's going to cost us about $3,000 for this. I hope it's in our budget. And only kidding. It's not going to cost our shrine anything except support. Mike Belcher has a link which should be sent out to everybody. And like I said, it's the support that you're there. And again, you're sponsoring the children in the hospital. They have a room where the kids go in and it's on a big, huge TV. And if the kids can't go in the room and they need to stay in their own room, they use their own device. It's been very, very successful. The kids love it. They end up watching something other than playing their video games. And they do look for the nurses look forward to it because they get to watch it also. So it's at 5 o'clock on the 31st. And sometimes we have to start it about 5 or 10 minutes after the 5 o'clock. So because they got to gather up their kids and make sure they're on the Zoom. And that's basically it. At least the shrine and at least Quaker City is doing something for the hospital.
Thank you, thank you.
Very good, Steve. Thank you.
Hopefully we see a lot of people, because what makes this successful is having a lot of people on the Zoom meeting or present. And hopefully that the kids enjoy it, the entertainment, and having people looking on them.
Now what happens is you need to go on mute and off of video. And the kids are going to be on mute and off of video. So the children, now they could see with the little boxes that they're there, which the more boxes around, it shows more support. And the only thing that you could see is the kid that is doing the concert.
We can't see them.
We can't see the kids. Every once in a while, they're allowed to put themselves on. Every once in a while, you'll see a kid, but it's usually all shut off.
That's because of HIPAA.
Yeah, that's because of him. Yes,
We'll see the entertainment, right?
we will see the entertainment. But we'll all be watching boxes with your name on it. You know, whatever name is there, Barry or whatever. But you'll be muted, and Mike usually mutes and makes everybody disappear. He has the power.
Yeah, he's that power. Yeah. Look at him smiling because he got power.
I'll go get my wizard hat. Arthur, do you have anything else you want to bring up?
And we had a meeting last year, a Zoom meeting, about the calendar, and we had made the executive board the 31st also Sunday morning. So hopefully everybody can make it at that time. I guess 11 o'clock is, we'll have to clear it with our present president, because he has to do the Zooming.
Fine, I'll set it up.
You all set up?
Yeah, I'll set it up. It's not a big deal.
Okay,
You're
fine.
nobody ain't now.
I'm a nobody. Soon to be nobody.
Michael, you
You
guys
had been.
FedExing us bagels and lox?
I will deliver bagels and lox to everyone's house for a nominal charge.
Virtual bagels and lox, right?
Virtual bagels and lox. We'll have to. Well, in the process, we'll have to find Sean his tie tack, and
I like mine regular locks, please.
all right, with whitefish.
With that everything bagel.
Before I say some closing remarks, which I do have a couple things I want to say, do any of the past presidents have anything they want to offer?
Hi, guys.
We're not closing off.
Michael did a good job as president this year. A lot of difficulty with the pandemic, and he pulled through with all the Saturday nights, game nights, and Zoom meetings we had. So you did an outstanding job, Mike.
Yeah, good job, Mike.
Thank you.
Good job. Mike.
Okay, now some final words before I pass it off to our chief or band. I want to thank everyone for their support this year. At times, even though it's just, we basically went to Zoom mainly, it's difficult. And having to learn this different platform was a lot more interesting, although it opened some different things up. Like tonight, Arthur's son is in Massachusetts. We wouldn't have been able to have that otherwise. We had the guy who talked about Star Wars. He was out in Los Angeles. So this platform does give us some different things that we couldn't have in person. So I think we basically made lemons. We turned lemons into lemonade, which I think was very, very nice.
Very good.
But all this does not happen without everyone's support. So I really, really, from the bottom of my heart, I really thank everyone for logging in, supporting the club. When we even had our in-person election, the people that came out, it was extremely appreciated. The people I directly want to thank is first my partner in crime, Fred, our past president. Fred was my ear. Anything I needed, Fred was there, jumped at it. And also I call my conscience, or the little Bart on my shoulders, Bart, who edits everything except for my handwritten letters that no one can understand, which Bart still edited. But Bart was also there for anything that I need also. And these guys work extremely hard for the club. My other cohort, we say, and I usually say it for Bart, it's, by the way, the acronym is WW, what would Bart do? I also want to thank illustrious Finky for his
Only what he would do in public, Mike.
Yes.
Without getting caught.
Illustrious sir, our past potentates, illustrious sir Finky for when I've needed guidance. Also Dennis Gold for all that he does for the club, which is sometimes a thankless job of all of his collecting money and taking care of stuff, and also giving me guidance also. Arthur has been a very good first vice president, and I think he's going to be an awesome president. And Stinky also for helping out with speakers. And Arthur, Arthur, Stinky, and Steven, any other officer, I am here to help you. I will never get in your way or open my mouth unless called upon. I feel that's a job as a past president, to help, aid, and assist, never to be a hindrance. Also, I want to thank my father-in-law, Barry Oppenheim. Barry's our secretary. There's times Barry's edited for me or just been a good ear. And everyone knows Barry is much more than just a father-in-law to me. He's a noble friend and is extremely close to me. Lastly, she's not on the call, but Dana and the kids, for tolerating me, for never, whether, even though I'm home, I'm really not home because I'm downstairs. But my wife for being extremely supportive, and the children for allowing their father not to be here. But thank everybody. And it's been an interesting year. So at this time, I will now call upon our chief for band, John Green, to speak. I can gavel, but I don't know. I'll break the table if I gavel.
Okay.
Don't wake Dan.
All right. Heavenly Father, we bring another end to our meeting. We thank you for your presence in our midst, your guidance and our grace. We prepare to go our separate ways. Be with us. Lead us outside. Lead us on and guide us. Keep us safe and secure until we meet again. Amen.
Thank you, everyone. This is
Gentlemen,
going
have
to
a
be
good night.
Good
Good meeting. Thank you.
I'm going to post this to
everybody.
YouTube at some point later. Thank you, everyone.
Take care,
Have a
gentlemen.
great night and stay healthy.
Arthur, that was great.
Okay,
Saturday.
Take care. Stay safe.
Thank you,
Thank
gentlemen.
you.
Good job. Good.
Thank you, Sean.
Good.
Thank you, Illustrious. Thank you, Finky.
Good night, everyone.
Thank you, Gary.
Take care.
Thank you, Gary.
Gary Shepherd.
Mark, Fred.
Gary, I'm calling you tomorrow.
Oh, Gary.
Hi, guys.
Somebody's got to wake Dan up.
Somebody's. He'll be there next month for the meeting.
Interesting.
Okay, good night, everybody.
All right.